Way back in the spring of 1990, 10-year-old me was given a $5 allowance. In search of something to spend my money on, I came upon something fantastic at my local convenience store newsstand. It was then that I started a lifelong obsession with the gold standard of sequential art, the comic book. Now, as an old man, I have decided to open up some old boxes and dig into my comic book collection. I decided it's time for me to review and analyze the illustrations and artists that made me comics crazy. Hey everyone, this is Chris Crazy House, and we are back for another episode of Chris Crazy House Presents Comics Crazy. And today, we are finally at the conclusion of the Revenge of the Sinister Six. And let's go ahead and get started immediately and take a look at this cover, because this cover is something mean here. This cover is a lot. There's a lot to digest on this cover here. I mean, it kicks it right off. If you look at the very top of this cover, and lets you know this book is featuring Ghost Rider, Deathlock, the Hulk, Solo, and the Fantastic Four. So just a whole bunch of guest stars. And we see with the cover here, it starts out with, your eye is drawn immediately to Spider-Man. And, he's prominent right there up front on the cover, as he should be, since it's his book. And behind him, we can see the Ghost Rider, and below him, we can see Deathlock. So these were two of the popular characters during this time period. Ghost Rider was selling a lot, and Deathlock was another new 90s character who was more of like an anti-hero. So they made sure that they featured those two prominently on the front cover with Spider-Man coming right at you. And this cover is special because it's a fold-out cover. So let's take a look at it. Let me fold it out here. You fold it out this way, and you can see more characters on the back, but it also folds out even more so you can get the rest of the image. And it's a full image of Spider-Man and his friends basically fighting the Sinister Six. And, you got Dr. Octopus here, Electro, Mysterio, the Hobgoblin, the Vulture, and Gog, who's the new character that is in the Sinister Six. And you see some of the robot drones in the background that are helping out the Sinister Six, kind of, giving them a couple more numbers there to fight these heroes and giving the heroes some more cannon fodder. And as we scroll back here, we can see all the heroes that are going to be in this story. They said the Fantastic Four is going to be in this one. The Hulk is in this one. Nova is in this one. And so is Solo, all the way in the background there, teleporting in and holding his guns. And just so you don't forget, the Sandman, who is in glass, or was turned into glass by Dr. Octopus in one of the other issues of the Revenge of the Sinister Six. They put that little panel there just to let you know and remind you, yes, he is in here, okay? And he does play a prominent role. We will see as the story unfolds. So this is the floppy copy. This is the one that I originally bought way back in the early 90s. And here is the collected edition of the Revenge of the Sinister Six. You actually get to see the full fold-out image. Now, this is probably like the drawback to having any type of collected book. When you have like a fold-out cover, it's hard to display it in these collected books, so they kind of had to truncate the image and kind of, squeeze it down a little bit, and you get to see the whole thing. And it's, the colors look good, the colors pop very well, but it just looks so much better as a large image. That's just my opinion. When I saw this on the shelf when it first came out, obviously I was already into the story, but seeing all these guest stars and seeing Spider-Man like in a great pose right there on the cover, I'm like, yeah, we're picking this up. There's no doubt about it. We got to get it. This is the ultimate conclusion. Everybody that have made a guest appearance in this series is going to be showcased in this book. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. But once again, you can see the full image here in the collective version of this book here, The Revenge of the Sinister Six. Looks good. Like I said, the colors and everything look very well. And I do like the way that the composition works for these characters. But once again, it just looks better in its original comic book form. You can tell that when Eric Larson designed this fold-out cover, it was very much designed for the newsstand. It wasn't designed for this. This takes it down a peg, in my opinion. Still looks good, but doesn't have that same wow factor because it's not the fold-out newsstand copy that we were used to from back in the 90s. So let's peel open this story and get started with the final episode of The Revenge of the Sinister Six. Before we get to the story, we can open up the book and see that we got a fold-out ad for the movie Encino Man. Actually, one of my favorite teen comedy movies from the 90s, starring Brendan Fraser, Sean Astin, and Pauly Shore. And like I said, it's one of my favorite movies from that era. I remember watching it on cable all the time. It seemed like it was one of those movies that was in heavy rotation if you had like HBO or Cinemax back then. So I used to watch it on cable all the time. It would usually come on like right after school or right before school. So yeah, I very much remember watching Encino Man. And during the pandemic, when I was trying to complete my teen comedy movies from the 80s and 90s collection, this is one of the movies I bought on DVD. I made sure I bought it and added it to my collection. So if you have any great memories of Encino Man, you can always put it in the comments section because it is a classic. So moving on to the beginning of The Revenge of the Sinister Six, Part 6. And it starts off right where it left off. We know in the last issue, Spider-Man was being cornered by the other members of the Sinister Six. They were all surrounding him, and he was all by himself. The Hulk had been knocked out. Ghost Rider had been knocked out by Gog. And the Sleepwalker had disappeared. And our boy Deathlock is not there yet. So Spider-Man was all by his lonesome against the Sinister Six. But we see right here that he has decided to be a man of action and not wait for them to attack him. He decided to go on the offensive. And you see right here, he's given Electro and the Vulture the beats by Peter Parker. And I appreciate that. I love this pose here. It's a very simple Spider-Man pose compared to a lot of the poses that were done back then. But I like the double hit. I always like when superheroes can do stuff like this, when they can hit more than one opponent. That's kind of like the fun thing about drawing your hero fighting multiple opponents at one time. They get to hit multiple opponents at one time. So he's giving Electro a kick upside the head and busting the Vulture in his mouth. So even though these guys got even more advanced weapons to accelerate their powers, it's still not effective against Spider-Man as he's fighting his way through. So flip over here, and this is where we got the big old splash page. The double splash page of Spider-Man kind of swinging out and trying to avoid the Sinister Six while Gog is trying to capture him in the background. And I love this. This double splash page, I think, is a very well done. Now, not a fan of this exposition because it gives a lot, and they put a lot. They're trying to kind of fill in the gaps as to where Gog has been since his last appearance. And that's why they're doing a lot of exposition here. Really is not important. I think the story right here is more important. But, you know, just for the Marvel fans out there, they want to make sure that you have like a little bit of a backstory as to where these characters have been since then, right? But I love this because it shows the scale of what Spider-Man is fighting. You know, he's prominent in the front here, and I do kind of like how the bottom part of him is kind of shaded in. But you can see he's trying to escape this large monster in the background, and I love that. I love when artists can show the scale of their creatures. I think that's been kind of like a lost art form when it comes to doing comic books nowadays. You don't get that scale as much as you used to. with the newer comics. That's just my opinion. It's very rare that you see it, but with this, you definitely see it, because Gog, because it can't even fit onto the pages, you'll see his hand and coming right at you, and like his face in the background. I think that really adds to the menace and the mystery of the creature you're dealing with. And right here we got our main bad guys, the rest of the Sinister Six, Dr. Octopus, Hobgoblin, and Electro, sitting in the background, and Mysterio with his cape waving and smoke billowing around him. Very well done as far as like a double splash page. And you even get to see here, if you look off in the corner, you see the Hulk and Ghost Rider being picked up by the robotic drones of the Sinister Six, after they've both been knocked out by Gog. And you see all the dead Hydra soldiers just sort of littering the area. So let's click over to this page. And we got the classic 90s news reporter. And it's funny because he kind of looks like Clark Kent. He looks like, you know, Superman in disguise a little bit. And he's kind of reporting on what's going on. Now, while I'm not a fan of heavy exposition, I do think it's cool if you can do exposition like this. Like if you can do a news report, and this was very much popularized by Frank Miller when he did the Dark Knight Returns. He did a lot of these news reports from what was going on in Gotham City. Then later on, the Image guys, they kind of appropriated that, where people like Rob Liefeld would use it in Youngblood, Todd McFarlane would use it in his Spawn comics, and even Eric Larson uses it when he does Savage Dragon. So the whole like news reporter idea, and you know, do the exposition for what's going on in the city, I think that's actually a cool device, and it actually works well here, because we get to see not only the reporter on the news reporting what's going on with the Sinister Six, we get to see pieces of which heroes, or previews of which heroes are going to join Spider-Man in this battle. So right here, just by the way the dialogue is written, we know that the Fantastic Four are the ones watching this on TV. By the weird looking computer screen, we can tell that this is Solo. He's the one that's watching it on these computer screens. And, you know, just this regular old apartment, we find out that this is our boy Nova in his secret identity, just kind of watching it on his little box TV screen. And he's going to go out there and join the battle. So a very cool way of showcasing not only the exposition of what's going on, but a preview of letting you know who's going to join this battle. So before we get to the rest of the book, another cool ad from the early 90s, Cool World. I remember this ad campaign very well, obviously, because it was a cute, sexy girl. And we all knew Cool World was coming out. It was going to be another live action and animation combination, kind of like the Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But this was going to be a little bit more for adults. So people were very much looking forward to this film coming out. And it was produced by Ralph Bakshi, one of my favorite animators. He's someone who's like an idol of mine when it comes to being kind of a rebel in doing animation and doing independent films. So he's someone that I've always appreciated his film work and his work in animation over the years. But very famous ad campaign. I remember this very well. It was in all the comics. It was on a lot of like game magazines and stuff like that. They were advertising Cool World real heavy, and they had lots of commercials going on at the time during afternoons when cartoons were on. So we turn to the next page here, and we get to see a shot of Mary Jane. So while this big battle is going on in downtown New York with the Sinister Six, we have Mary Jane here trying to go talk to the casting directors for her new Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. And she is going to be starring in the movie. They picked her to be in the film, but her husband doesn't like the fact that she might be doing some nude scenes. So Mary Jane is actually there to have a meeting with the filmmakers to ask if they could take the nude scenes out of the script, so she doesn't have to strip down for this movie. And she's getting ready to have a meeting with them, and she's kind of worried, because saying that, you know, this is a big deal for her. She's finally moving ahead in her acting career, not just going to be on TV soap operas anymore. She's moving into big movies. But, you know, she's worried how her husband feels about this decision to be nude in the film. So she's going to try to talk them out of it. And we're going to see how this ends up later on. So look forward to the end of this story where Mary Jane resolves her issues with this film. Clicking back to the action, our boy Spider-Man is not faring very well right now. He's trying his best to use all of his agility and spider senses and everything else to avoid getting murdered by these robotic drones of the Sinister Six. And it's kind of trying to like move out of the way of them, but also use them to fight the other members. So when people like the Hobgoblin are shooting their hand cannons at Spider-Man, he kind of maneuvers the robotic drones in the way to block from getting smashed. And while trying to do that, he's also trying to avoid getting smashed by Gog. So Spider-Man's just going through it right now, and he's got people shooting at him. Dr. Octopus's arms are floating around. There's laser blasts coming at him. Spider-Man's just in a whole bunch of trouble right now. He's not doing too well. And right when they finally have him cornered and they think they're going to finally finish off Spider-Man and achieve the goal that all these villains have wanted to achieve for so long, that's when the cavalry comes in. And the cavalry is in the form of the Fantastic Four. And we got the famous words by the Thing saying it's clobbering time. And rightfully so. I love that. The Thing is one of my favorite characters of all time. And having them join in on this battle is perfect because the Marvel Universe kind of really got going with characters like the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, so they were kind of like the two anchor characters. So having them team up in this issue is very special. And we also got our boy Nova. He shows up. He zooms right in there, giving some of that cosmic power and punching Electro right off the screen. I kind of like this shot here. I don't normally enjoy weird fight scenes like this because, Eric Larson kind of does this sometimes, and so does Rob Liefeld, but I kind of like this one. I like the way he kind of zooms in because I can follow it with my eye and see that it's zooming in, and he's kind of coming up and giving like a large uppercut to Electro, and Electro's kind of falling down that way. Very cool intro for Nova. And likewise, Solo comes in. He teleports into the scene and starts shooting up stuff, screaming his catchphrase, while Solo lives, terror dies. And he's just basically opening up and opening fire on anybody who will take some of these bullets. And just like last time, when they got overwhelmed, Mysterio jumps into the mix and tries to put his illusion powers on the heroes. And it works, because we see right here, the Thing winds up punching Mr. Fantastic, thinking that he's actually beating up Dr. Octopus. And I like the way Eric Larson does these panels because it gives you what the hero is seeing, but we get the reveal just like in a small panel here. I thought this was a very clever way of showcasing this illusion. And it works well because the divide of the panel lets you know what reality is, but it still is congruent with this illusion that's on this side. So I love the way this looks here. Likewise, we see Spider-Man doing the same thing, thinking he's fighting Electro, but he's really kicking the Human Torch in the face. And it extends even down here where the Invisible Woman is shooting her invisible beams. She thinks it's the Hobgoblin, but she's really hurting Nova. So we got that here. Spider-Man figures out that it's actually an illusion by when he kicked Electro, he actually wound up burning his foot a little bit. So that's when the other people show up that are here for the battle, and it is Ghost Rider and the Hulk. So they jump back into the battle. I guess they woke up from getting knocked out by Gog, which is very helpful, but the illusion is still being cast, so things are just going completely haywire. We see poor Spider-Man here saying no. We see Ghost Rider's head flying off panel. The Thing and the Hulk are fighting. I don't know if this is an illusion being cast or were they really just fighting. Because I mean, they're like that. They're two characters that love fighting each other anyway. So this might not be an illusion. They might just be fighting each other for real. And we see Mysterio sitting here laughing and the heroes sort of just battering each other. But out of nowhere, Who comes to save the day? Deathlock. He comes in with his cybernetic fist and busts Mysterio up the head. And, we figure out that Deathlock, his cybernetics allow him to not be fooled by Mysterio's illusions. So he was the foil for that power set, and I appreciate that. The fact that he becomes useful in that way, that he's able to detect what reality is and not have illusions be casted on him because he has a computer for a brain. And this is where we get the panel of all the heroes together, ready to go fight and take on the Sinister Six. I kind of wish this was a little bit bigger, but I get it. Because they wanted to have the action on the next page. But I like this panel right here with all the heroes together. I probably would have made it a little bit bigger, just my opinion. But, do what you got to do. And probably, this was probably a lot easier, too, to draw it in a smaller way and not try to make too big of another splash page for this book. Before we get back to the action, I had to draw attention to this classic ad from the newsstand version of this comic book. And that is an ad for one of the greatest games from the Super Nintendo era, Contra 3, The Alien Wars. One of my favorite games of all time, and one of the greatest games of the 16-bit era. Fight me in the comments if you want to, if you disagree with that, okay? Because I love this game. This is one of my favorite games of all time. It was one of those games that I played a lot till I beat it. And it was one of those games that actually caused a little bit of confrontation in my home because my little brother used to play it with me, and he would get upset when his character would die, and he'd want to throw the control down and stuff. He would get all emotional. But I love this game. The graphics were amazing. The simple plot, as it were, was very enjoyable with fighting these alien wars. Now these characters have come down to Earth and destroyed Earth. They had lots of little fun graphic scenes and cut scenes in the game that were very new at the time. And the artwork in this game is just amazing. The pixel artwork is chef's kiss. The only other game I could say was just as good as this one, it was also from Konami, and that was Castlevania 4 or Super Castlevania. So I love both of those games. I had them both, and I spent hours playing both of them. But this game right here, Contra 3, The Alien Wars, this was the shit. And if you played this game back in the day, let me know in the comment section. I know a lot of you probably had either a Super Nintendo or a Sega Genesis back then. Let me know what you thought of Contra 3. It was one of my favorite games at that time. So just when you think our heroes are getting it together and they're going to be able to fight off these villains, we got that big X factor coming back into play, and that's the character of Gog, a giant monster from another dimension. He reaches down in the ceiling and punches at the heroes, and they all have to scatter. So our heroes are not out of the fire just yet. They still have to manage to beat these characters, these monsters that are just hanging around and defending the Sinister Six. So we get back here to the action. Spider-Man and the Invisible Woman together, teaming up to fight the Hobgoblin. And we see that he's, shooting his gigantic cannons and doing his best to murder our hero Spider-Man. And poor Johnny Storm is getting clocked upside the head by one of these drones. And that's when our boy Nova pops in. So there's lots of action just going on in individual panels. And this is something that I've seen Eric Larson kind of popularize, this type of action where things almost seem to be happening at random, but it's just a lot of chaos going on in the battle. But it's easy to follow. Robert Kirkman does the same thing, or maybe I should say more, Ryan Oatley does the same thing. He's the artist for Invincible, but, Robert Kirkman writes it, but I think Ryan Oatley gets a lot of leeway in how he designs his pages and his panels. But I know Robert Kirkman is a big Eric Larson fan, so I can see definitely the influence in how they tell their stories with their action. But, things are kind of happening at random here. The Hulk is beating up some drones. Ghost Rider is punching Electro in the face, and we see our boy Solo getting a giant cannon ready. You see he's actually cacking this cannon here, which is hilarious. Like the fact that he's kind of pulling it up and making it bigger and bigger, and it's coming from in between his legs. I'm wondering what our boy Solo is compensating for, but he unleashes the cannon, and we see he finally takes out Gog. So he fires it and basically fries him. And what's kind of silly is, Spider-Man saying, "Stop, you'll kill him." I doubt that, Spider-Man. I think Spider-Man's being a little extreme here. Unless you had like a nuclear weapon or something, I don't see what could kill Gog at this point. He only seems to be incapacitated. I'm surprised this weapon did that well. But he shoots Gog, and as Gog falls down backwards, that beam still goes up into the sky and destroys the Sinister Six's ship. So that large airship that they had from another dimension, that gets completely destroyed by Solo. Now Spider-Man tries to swoop in and take out Solo, but Solo disappears. He teleports out of there, so Spider-Man can't catch him. And we got a cool page here, a cool action sequence where Deathlock is shooting the guns out of the Vulture's hands, and our boy Ghost Rider is beating down the Hobgoblin, knocking the cannons out of his hands. So now the Sinister Six are being completely disarmed from all their new weapons that they brought to Earth so that they can fight the heroes and think that they're going to take over the world with these new weapons. And last but not least, we got Dr. Octopus thinking he's going to be able to go onto the Hydra's satellites and blow up the Earth, but Reed Richards just stretches in there and basically just unplugs the satellite. So he didn't have to do much. He didn't have to use his super intellect. He basically just unplugged everything. So now his stuff doesn't work anymore. And our boy, the Hulk, comes in and swings Dr. Octopus around by his arms. So the Vulture and the Hobgoblin realize that this is a lost cause, and they decide to skedaddle out of there, as most cowards do. This is what villains do. They decide to run when it gets real tough out here. So I can understand that. And they're pretty much outclassed by the caliber of heroes that they're dealing with. We got the Ghost Rider and Johnny Storm destroying some of the robots. Our boy Electro, he's trying to zap the Invisible Woman, but winds up Spider-Man sneaking up on him and hitting him with a super uppercut. One of those "you're going to jail now" uppercuts, and knocks Electro completely out. And the Sinister Six seem to be done. Like, whether they've been taken out by the heroes or they decide to escape and get out of there while the getting is good, and only Dr. Octopus is left. But he thinks his ego just won't let him, retreat or surrender. He decides to try to fight all of the heroes with his mechanical arms, his new adamantium arms. And he actually seems to be doing a good job at this point. He thinks he'll be able to handle them now with these new arms. But one thing he did not count on, our boy Sandman. That's right. Sandman is still in the mix. He's pissed off for being not only turned into glass, but being completely shattered by Dr. Octopus. But he wound up putting himself back together in his glass form, and Dr. Octopus is scared. He realizes that he messed up because he didn't just completely destroy Sandman, and Sandman is actually now more deadly than ever. Sandman is one of the few characters that can counter Dr. Octopus in his arms. Everyone else will be kept away, but Sand can maneuver through those arms, and now that he's glass, he's even more deadly. He basically uses his body parts to completely shred Dr. Octopus. And this was during the 90s where things were getting a little bit more violent. However, this was a cool way of showing Dr. Octopus get shredded without being overly gratuitous or overly violent. So they basically just show his silhouette, all the glass going by, and all the little sound effects. I probably would have done these sound effects a little bit differently. I wouldn't just have put them over that character like that. But based on the comic book code, he might have had to do that. That might have been a way of kind of, lessening the violence. Maybe that's it. But I wouldn't have done it this way because I think this kind of looks weird with the text over the body like that. I wouldn't have done it like that. But Dr. Octopus is shredded and he basically just drops. And Spider-Man is saying, you could have killed him. And Sandman is saying, well, he deserves worse than that. So, you know, they agree to disagree on this situation. So everything seems to be taken care of now. The bad guys are defeated. The Hulk and the Ghost Rider decide to take off. Gog is kind of just sitting there, laying in the street, knocked out. And Mr. Fantastic is basically saying that he'll find a way to send Gog back to his other dimension without hurting him. So our boy Sandman is kind of sitting on the sidelines, and Spider-Man decides to give him a lecture about being a hero, saying that we as heroes don't kill. I know you're trying to change. I know you're trying to turn over a new leaf. At this point, the Sandman was actually a reserve member of the Avengers, but, you know, he came very close to killing Dr. Octopus. And really, Dr. Octopus deserved it. I mean, he had killed a lot of people. He probably would have gotten a death penalty anyway, Spider-Man, so I don't know why he's upset about him getting shredded. He's still alive. He's just going to be in intensive care for a long time. So that is the end of the action part of the story. What's going on with our boy Peter and Mary Jane? So at the end, we find out that Mary Jane went to talk to those guys and say that she's not, you know, she doesn't want to do the nude scene. And she found out the hard way that that's all those directors wanted from her. That's the reason they hired her in the first place, is so she can get bucket naked in front of the camera. And she was very put off by that and has decided that she's not going to do the movie because she found it very disrespectful that all these guys wanted was just to see her with no clothes on. So she's not going to be in the movie, and Peter seems to be happy about that, and they're going home to just sit back, relax, have some ice cream, and maybe just, you know, some couple cuddles or something like that. But we open the door and find out that Mary Jane had made a surprise birthday party for Peter Parker. It was alluded to that his birthday was coming up, and she hadn't thought about it, and Peter was so preoccupied with the Sinister Six, he wasn't thinking about it, but she made sure to invite all his family and friends, and they showed up for his birthday, and I appreciate that. You know, in this particular series, what we saw mostly was superhero versus supervillain action. There wasn't not a lot of concentration on the life of Peter Parker, but, you know, Spider-Man is always known for his supporting cast. It's not just the Rogues Gallery that he's known for. That supporting cast is also extremely important to the Spider-Man universe, and I appreciate, at the very least, seeing them here at the end. So, you know, you got Aunt May and her new boyfriend, Willie Lumpkin, the mailman, Robbie Robertson. We got J. Jonah Jameson. I think this is supposed to be Betty Brant. Got Felicia Hardy, Flash Thompson. I think this is Ned Leeds. And there's Robbie Robertson's son in the background there. I can't remember some of these other characters, but very cool scene here. I appreciate seeing all these characters here wishing Peter a happy birthday. I think that's very important to have that great supporting cast from the Spider-Man universe. So that is the end of this story of the Revenge of the Sinister Six. I thought it was very well done by Eric Larson. I think he did a good job. This was like, this last issue was like literally pure action all the way through. So we got started off strong with Spider-Man beating up the bad guys and running away from Gog, trying to save himself basically. And then right when he gets cornered, that's when all of our heroes show up. All the good guys show up to help our boy Spider-Man. So this was action from start to finish. Very well done, in my opinion. And Eric Larson is very good at drawing this type of action. This would be the last work during this time anyway that he was going to do for Marvel. And then he moved on to working on his own book, The Savage Dragon, for many years. And we will be doing some reviews of Savage Dragon as time goes on this channel and on this particular show here. So make sure you stay tuned for that. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you like my reviews of these classic comics. and make sure you share with anyone else who is a classic comic book fan. I'd very much appreciate having them here for these reviews. Anyway, folks, this is Chris Crazy House. I appreciate you, and I am signing out. Peace.